They have been feared, burned, and mostly misunderstood.
We went underground after 9 million people were burned, hanged, and tortured.
They can journey to the darkness, where good and evil can become one.
It's often been said that the gods of the old become the devils of the new. In actual fact, witches don't even believe in the devil, let alone worship him.
They were born in an age when magic was a religion, and they live among us today. They are witches.
Beyond what is known lies an unexplored world of shadows and phantoms. A land that knows no limits of time or space. From the dawn of discovery to the nightfall of catastrophe. Journey to a universe of the unexplained, the unforeseen, the unbelievable. A place beyond reality where no question will go unanswered. A place where myth and legend are law, superstition a science.
It's time for our journey to begin. You stand at the crossroads between superstition and reality. You are witches. Knowledge surrounds these library walls, and with these instruments, that knowledge can be ours. When some of us imagine a witch, we think of a cloaked hag huddled over a boiling pot filled with unspeakable ingredients, or flying through the night upon a broomstick. That image, alas, is far from the truth. To discover what a witch really is, we must journey back to an ancient time when magic was a way of life, and the gods battled for the hearts and minds of humanity. Time is running out. The ways of the old gods were no longer the ways of the people. The wise priests knew that their magic was no longer welcome. So on that last Hallows Eve, they came to this spot where the moon touched the earth to put their magic to rest. The secrets that had been spoken loudly so the world could hear would now be whispered, for a new god had risen, and his priests would not tolerate the old ways. It was somehow appropriate that they should consign their tools to the soil, for the gods had taught them to venerate the ground, the sky, and they would protect the knowledge until the time was right to rise again. But the whispers would rustle through the dark forests, the silent rivers, the ways of the Wicca would never be forgotten. Their beliefs would live on, their descendants known as witches. Do what thou wilt, and let it hurt none. This is the credo of many modern witches, witches whose rituals take many different forms. There are four basic kinds of witches: hereditary, traditional, Gardnerian, and Alexandrian. Hereditary witches have kept the traditions of magic alive through their families for thousands of years, quietly behind closed doors. Traditional witches pay close attention to preserving historical rituals from Europe, though they can be found the world over. Gardnerian witches take their name from the studies of Gerald Gardner, an English witch and author who died in 1964. Another personality-driven cult is the Alexandrian, named for a modern English witch who emphasized ceremony and codified ritual. Because of their persecution, very little about how witchcraft began has been recorded. This shadowy past has done much to perpetuate stereotypes. But as is often the case, those cliches do have some basis in reality. For example, some witches still use a broomstick during their meetings, called covens, not to fly, but for ceremony.
The broomstick is frequently associated with witches. They were thought to ride through the air on their broomstick going to the Sabbath site. And this is a distortion of what actually happened in the early days. There was a time of year when the village people would go down to the fields and they would take along with them broomsticks and they would ride astride them like on a hobby horse. And as they danced around, they would jump up in the air. And they felt that the higher they jumped, the higher the crops would grow. Is what we would call sympathetic magic.
Another popular witch cliché is the cauldron, bubbling with unspeakable ingredients. In actuality, the cauldron has a far more palatable origin.
The cauldron was used in the early days when witches came from miles around to gather at the Sabbath sites to celebrate the main festivals. And they would bring with them the food that they wanted to eat, having traveled some distance. And they would cook it in a big cauldron over a fire set up before getting down to the religious side of things. This is where the cauldron came to be associated with witches.
The misconceptions surrounding witchcraft are legion, and modern-day witches are attempting to set the record straight.
The most upsetting misconceptions are that witches are Satanists and that we worship Satan or the devil. And witches don't have any Satan or any devils or demons in their belief structure.
People assume that witches are going to do something bad or wrong or hurt them. I have no desire to hurt anybody. That's not part of my life.
Our motto is, as it harm none, do as ye will. Witches don't believe in harming any living thing.
Witches look like everybody else looks. They're human beings. They're going to have your general yuppie look, your Gucci skirt, your fashion plate, your dungarees. Often, many witches who work in the bank will wear black most of the time, and no one really knows the difference because right now it's very fashionable.
Within witchcraft, there are no 10 commandments, there's no catechism or anything like that. There's just one law, and that law is, and it harm none, do what thou wilt. This basically means that you can do anything you like so long as you harm no one else. And this is really the only law that we find that we need.
One of the most startling facts about witches is that there are more of them today than ever before. Their rituals have remained unchanged for thousands of years, though they have adapted to our modern world in occasionally surprising and shocking ways. These are witches' tools. Innocent in appearance, mysterious in function, they're easily purchased in many places. They only become powerful when used as ritualistic tools to summon and control powers beyond our wildest dreams or nightmares.
Hail, Aradia, goddess of the east, powers of air. We invoke you and call upon you. By the breath that is her spirit, send forth your light.
We are not in medieval Germany, nor hidden in the bowels of some castle in England. No, this is Woodland Hills, California, in the United States. And these are modern-day witches. This coven gathers together often and follows the procedures passed down through the ages. Here they prepare to consecrate the earth, for this is a time of joining, of becoming, and of singing.
We all come from the goddess, and to her we shall return.
There is so much energy and love that goes around, that comes out of the voices, and even those of us who can't carry a tune to save our life sound great. And you feel that love there, in yourself and in your friends. That's what singing does for me anyway.
These arcane ceremonies can take on many different forms, but they all share one thing in common. symbolic magic achieved by archaic ritual empowered by modern-day belief.
The idea of sympathetic magic is that like attracts like, so that, like in our society, we think of money as being green. If you want to draw money to you, you would use a green candle. Or you'd make up a little herbal amulet of herbs that are associated with the monetary planets like Jupiter or something like that. And you'd put those herbs together and sew them up into a green sack that you would carry with you, and that kind of thing.
Some modern-day witches argue that ritual needs to adapt to the times, to take on a more contemporary guise. But as in anything, tradition is hard to cast aside, and to some people, the rewards are worth the risks of ridicule.
It's something that brings out the best in me. It's really hard to describe how I feel in circle and how I feel afterwards. It's kind of like runner's high, really. Feel it flowing around through the hands joined together.
The old ways die hard. Some of the symbols and ceremonies associated with witchcraft have survived virtually unchanged for thousands of years, dating back to an age when magic was a science. In some ways, magic is a state of mind. Through the use of objects and symbols such as these, witches can focus their psychic energies upon any target they choose. These objects are props, if you will, in a strange form of mental theater. Now, most modern-day witches consider themselves to be white or good magicians, though black magic can be practiced as well, and these dark practices have done much to cloud mass perception. Magic can be practiced any time, but on the 8 annual days of gathering called Sabbats, it can be particularly potent. One of the most notorious of these Sabbats takes place on All Hallows Eve, October 31st. We know that day as Halloween, and mark it by following an ancient tradition. In medieval times, fearful peasants would place lit candles inside carved gourds to frighten away marauding witches, a habit that has passed down to today's decorative pumpkins. Black magic and the fear it inspires has led to witches being on the defensive for centuries. That's an understatement when one considers the great witch hunts that took place in the late 15 and early 1600s. Many of those unfortunates accused of being witches were actually persecuted for darker reasons. And the more we understand those reasons, the less chance there is of witch hunts occurring again. This book, written in medieval times, is called the Malleus Maleficarum, or Witch's Hammer. It's a step-by-step guide into the world of hysteria. It shows in gruesome detail the ways to extract confessions from accused witches. And in these trials by torture, there's no such thing as innocence, only degrees of guilt. In the late 1500s in Europe, a wave of hysteria swept the land. Organized religion felt that the ways of the Wicca were a grave threat to their belief systems, and the pulpit became a platform for the denunciation and then extermination of anyone suspected of consorting with the old gods.
In Europe, especially during the Middle Ages, when schisms racked the church, there was a move to purify the church from within. And there were many investigations, the Inquisition and so forth. So for centuries in Europe, there had been tremendously brutal witch hunts, and church leaders conducted these. This went on in England as well.
The New World was not immune to these insanities, and in 1692, in the town of Salem in Massachusetts in the United States, the worst of the Old World corrupted the New.
There had been incidents of witchcraft in New England for a 50-year period preceding the hysteria of 1692. But when the hysteria broke out in Salem, it was much more dramatic in terms of numbers and the degree of panic.
This panic began innocently. A group of bored schoolgirls amused themselves by dabbling in black magic taught to them by a West Indian slave. This experiment soon got out of control.
In the winter, people were pretty well confined to their homes, and teenagers had very little to do, especially young women. However, they found some entertainment in talking to Tituba, who was a West Indian, and in fact she taught them some charms and pretended, I think, to read their futures and so on. Of course, they were caught and were asked whether they had been signed on, if you will, as Satan's own, and they said yes.
These confessions soon ignited the flame of hysteria, unprecedented in the Americas. Neighbor turned against neighbor, making ludicrous and unsubstantiated charges that were nevertheless accepted at face value. Soon the courts were busy trying, torturing, condemning.
When the summer was over, 19 people had been hanged. One man had been crushed to death because he would not speak, crushed to death under stones that were placed on his chest. They were called firebrands of hell. And because of this, they were denied burial. Their bodies were flung down Gallows Hill and left for animals to devour.
Soon the fever burned itself out. In all, 24 men and women lost their lives. Salem still remembers its dark past, though some say the full impact of the horror has diminished with time.
I think what I have the most trouble with is the trivialization of injustice. When you see witch key rings and wall plaques on sale virtually everywhere in Salem, it's a little difficult to swallow. I feel it's more like selling Indian feathers at Wounded Knee or ashes in vials at Dachau. I find no humor, I find no eeriness, I find only horror.
Today, witchcraft arouses interest and some suppressed fear, but it is hardly viewed as a direct threat to anyone. Its converts feel that rather than a threat, it's a powerful force for good, literally changing the world for the better.
There was a time when magic was taken for granted, its power accepted in much the same way as we accept electricity. The world has grown more complex since those innocent times, and today, man is detached from the mystic world, viewing it as an object of ridicule, even entertainment.
I think there will always be places where witches are not accepted, and I would hope that the places in which witches are accepted would become larger.
Witchcraft, although it's what might be thought of as an ancient religion, is actually very relevant to the present. It ties in very much with the ecological movement, with the women's rights movement, and because of this, it's become very, very popular.
We are people, we are families, we are men and women and children. The misconceptions go on and on and on, and of course we take responsibility for that. And that's what we are trying to do now, help people to understand us so that we are not the disposal for the ills of the earth. Because if they're looking for evil in us, they're looking in the wrong place.
These men and women who can so easily sail into the mystic world are not to be feared. They are to be understood, for they may have knowledge that can benefit us all, helping us to comprehend the boundaries of our real world a little more fully. The ancient ways live on. Your gods still exist as long as you believe. Witches, echoes of a magical past.
Secrets and Mysteries presents information based in part on theories and opinions, some of which are controversial. The producer's purpose is not to validate any side of an issue, but through the use of actualities and dramatic recreation, relate a possible answer, but not the only answer, to this material.
According to a recent poll taken in the United States, half of its population believed that the universe is inhabited by other intelligent life. The rest of the world cannot be far behind. The 1950s witnessed a sharp increase in the number of sightings all around the world, and with it, more and more evidence that something unusual was happening in our skies. Even the United States government took notice, beginning an official Air Force investigation called Project Blue Book. Their files soon overflowed with more than 12,000 sightings. These water beasts may well be the most ancient surviving inhabitants of our planet.
Did I see the monster? I don't know, but I do believe that, I obviously saw some things, and nobody's been able to tell me what I saw. So I think I must have seen the monster.
Stonehenge. That place has become a metaphor for the magnificent, the unfathomable, and the mysterious.
I have the feeling that the people who built it had something very strongly in mind, maybe more than the astronomy and the worship. And I wish to goodness I knew what it was, and maybe I never will.
German scientist Werner von Braun is considered to be the architect of America's space program. Von Braun and his team took the technology from the German V-2 rocket, which had been created for destruction, and applied it to the development of the chariots that would take man to new worlds.
There's never been an astronaut who got on a spacecraft, whether it was Mercury, Apollo, or even shuttle, who didn't fully understand the risk involved and who wasn't willing to take them.
The only voyage of the Titanic was surrounded by bad luck that defies belief. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. It was as if she was cursed. A curse, some say, began when she was launched.
He went up and he came back. He said, "It's nothing much. They only struck an iceberg."
This magnificent object is a symbol of genius, of ambition, and of dedication, for it is believed to have taken 30 years to construct. And that construction is not the least of its miracles.
It stands as one of the most prominent monuments for its size and complexity, and also its lack of information about it. To be able to plan and economically accomplish such a large feat for the pharaoh is extraordinary.
This is the mark of Sasquatch, taken from a set of tracks that covered a 5-mile stretch of dense forest. The depth of each print indicates that whatever made it weighed 800 pounds. 800 pounds. And there's other, more dramatic evidence. On a hot afternoon in October, Roger Patterson and a friend were riding through some woods in northern California. Suddenly their horses shied. They looked ahead and saw something squatting by the creek. As the creature ambled away, Patterson took this film that has been analyzed, debated, and contested ever since.
The fear has gone out of the general public. The craft is more and more acceptable.
Paganism has infiltrated the mainstream thought pattern of most Americans today.
There is a pagan revival.
There are more people practicing true paganism than there are practicing true Christianity.
Many people were seeking something apart from Christianity.
The thing that attracts young people is the power, and it's immediate power.
Different.
You know what you are?
See it.
Vampire.
Whenever you drink blood, you gain incredible power.
We choose only to let the general public see what we want them to see.
Magic is about getting what you want. Magicians are people who get what they want.
Slowly but surely, the beauty of the craft is becoming widespread.
I'm not scared of you.
You really shouldn't have said that.
Black is not evil in any way.
Psychic vampirism and physical vampirism were very viable ways of achieving power in black magic.
But why hide it in this day and age? I've hidden in the shadows for centuries. It's time to share myself with the world.
I'm very proud to be a witch.
We live in a kind of post-Christian era. People are moving towards a kind of neo-paganism.
The neo-pagan revival has proceeded so rapidly. They have had the cooperation of the media in getting their message spread.
I want to do bad things with you.
A lot of what we do has been taken over by the church.
Christians really have married into occult practices. They no longer know the difference because they've become desensitized to the things of evil.
Are you afraid?
No.
The Satanists have merely followed the pantheist way of thought to its logical conclusion. If there are no absolutes, if God doesn't exist, he hasn't set absolute limits to what we can do. So therefore, anything that the self decides it wants, the self can go after.
We believe in greed, we believe in selfishness, we believe in all of the lustful thoughts that motivate man because this is man's natural feeling.
I think it can be put in one four-letter word, lust. There is a lust for power that is part of our sinful nature. C.S. Lewis talks about it as a spiritual lust, of spiritual itch to want to somehow reach into the unknown. We're fascinated by it. It's why horror movies and horror books are so popular.
The thing that attracts young people is the power, and it's immediate power, immediate results.
And this is very attractive because the people that fall into the trap of the occult are normally people that are majorly rejected. Then the devil comes and says, you are not rejected. You are actually very special.
Immediately, Satan gives them power because he doesn't need very much. He just needs somebody curious, and he'll use that, and he'll be the light for them, because he needs vessels as well.
In my case, at least, it was a gradual infiltration. It was a move from very innocent things like ESP and flying saucers, and then just a very gradual, many-year slide into finally regarding Satan as my God.
All religions are coming around to Satanism. We're in the very throes of a new satanic age. The evidence is all around us. All we have to do is look at it.
Shemham Parash. Shemham Parash. Hail Satan. Hail Satan.
The real Satanists, the hardcore Satanists, are involved in criminal activity, and for that reason they are going to try and look as normal as possible, the better to be able to deceive you.
Occult is a very serious thing. Many people take it very lightly, like it's a game, but it's a very serious matter. There are certain holidays that people consider them like Christian festivities, but their root are in the occult. And there's a lot of people just practicing it without knowing they're entering into the occult. And one of it is Halloween.
Halloween is the second biggest holiday of the year. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. In a 3-month period, we plan on doing over $500,000 in sales at this store. With Halloween being a pagan holiday, Halloween is getting more and more dangerous. So now a lot of the churches around here in Jacksonville are doing trick or trunk and other Halloween activities to bring the kids in from them being on the streets. We're a big supporter of the churches to keep the kids safer on Halloween.
It's a holiday that was made a part of the church calendar early on during the Middle Ages. It came into prominence as an effort of the churches to reach out to the secular culture. In its modern terms, it's generally regarded as a kind of harmless kids festival and candy harvest. But it has much deeper roots, and Halloween is changing its face today as some of the influences from those deeper roots are coming to the surface.
People think that, oh, well, that is just trick or treat, and we just have the children disguise. And the origin of all of that is the Druids. And they actually invoke a lot of spirits to go with the people. And if they don't give them things, actually the demons will enter the homes and will do all kind of destruction. And today we see all these homes of nice people, even Christians, that hang in their doors like phantoms or skulls. And they don't know they're really cursing their homes. They're inviting spirits of death. They're inviting spirits of occult, because this is not a game. They're real demonic spirits involved in Halloween.
In the larger culture, Halloween has become a focal point of some very negative forms of spirituality. It has become a big celebration for the gay community. And of course, the neo-pagan community and the witchcraft community have made it a major celebration of their liturgical year, which on some witchcraft calendars begins at Halloween.
I love Halloween. We dress up the house with cobwebs and so on, and we cast a circle, and we open the gates of the underworld. And if any spirits want to come forward and speak, we listen to them.
If the trend continues, if we do indeed continue to see a resurgence of the pagan spirit in society, one of the things we're going to see is that groups not directly related to each other are going to recognize their common source. One of the manifestations we see of this already is what has come to be called the Burning Man Festival.
This festival has become intensely popular as 50,000 people gather each year in the Nevada desert. As each ticket is nearly $300, this festival caters to the middle class, branding itself as an experimental community of artists and revealing many facets of the neo-pagan movement.
But the general theme of the Burning Man Festival is a complete anarchistic license.
There are no rules about how one must behave at this event. Rather, it is up to each participant to decide how they wish to express themselves. This creed attracts people who wish to abandon any kind of restraints that they feel society has imposed on them, indulging in bizarre and outlandishly hedonistic behavior.
Some of the things they do you wouldn't want to see on film and probably wouldn't even want to hear about. Some of the milder things that can be mentioned is our initiation, magical initiations by dousing a person in animals' bloods, divination by means of sacrifice, disembowelment, and examining the intestines of the sacrificed animal, and various forms of public sexual demonstration that are best left unmentioned, and that's just for starters. All of it done under the general rubric of paganism. Most of the people who are there regard themselves as pagans.
This festival pays homage to the ancient Wickerman bonfire ritual, whose druidic roots involved human sacrifice. There was one report of a woman throwing her infant into the bonfire in Black Rock, Nevada, fortunately rescued by an onlooker before any serious harm was incurred to the baby.
So what does the Bible have to say about paganism? Well, first of all, in the Ten Commandments, it forbids the worshiping of any other God except God Almighty. In the book of Isaiah, it talks about idols. It says, "Do not fear them. They can do you no harm, nor can they do you any good." In other words, idols have no effect. They're just pieces of wood. In the book of Psalms, it says, "They have hands without feeling and feet without power for walking, and no sound comes from their throat. Those who make them are like them, and so is everyone who puts faith in them." God says idols are worthless, and those who make them are stupid. Reminds me of Forrest Gump. Stupid is as stupid does. There's a very appealing side to paganism. Lucifer doesn't always come as the boogeyman, but he often comes as an angel of light, promoting all kinds of interesting concepts, particularly in the area of self-help, like in the book, The Secret. We're going to show you the secret and the secret behind the secret. This may amaze you.
The best-selling self-help book of our time is The Secret, which offers its readers unlimited prosperity by harnessing the power of the universe using the law of attraction.
We're all working with one power, one law. It's attraction.
Basically, the message of The Secret is the message that I've been trying to share with the world on my show for the past 21 years.
You are the designer of your destiny, and the outcome is whatever you choose.
I was able, because of this kind of technique, to bring my wife to me. I simply got a picture of a girl and kind of my ideal woman, and I put it on my little altar that I had in my bedroom, and I just went every night and I just visualized her. I did certain spells, and lo and behold, after about 6 months, I met her, and she looked amazingly like the picture.
When you visualize, then you materialize.
Visualisation plays a very important part in the craft. When you get a group of people together in a circle and they're doing a spell, the visualisation is important because it brings everybody together doing the same thing at the same time.
Some Christians are taught that this kind of technique can be used to acquire either physical or spiritual things. They believe that if they want a Cadillac, they take a picture of the Cadillac and they put it on their refrigerator, and every time they see that, they say, "I claim that Cadillac in the name of Jesus." And the trouble with that is it's precisely like what I was doing as a witch.
Visualize it, and then from your very solar plexus, feel that power working.
Make it a powerful memory, the happiest you can remember. Allow it to fill you up.
Build the power up within your own body.
This is really advanced stuff, guys. You're doing so well.
And start to direct it so that you may create the
cone of power?
You would be within the circle, which is where you have all your power and all your protection. Then there would be a triangle placed within that. And from within that triangle was the most power.
And what we do with it, with that cone of power, the moment we go down, it goes... It's gone. Where does it go? How does magic work? We don't know.
It does.
We really don't know. All we know is that we bring it into consciousness and we say, this is our will. We will it.
Now, if you don't understand it, doesn't mean you should reject it.
Our job is not to figure out the how.
The people behind the book The Secret say, well, we don't really know how it works, it just works. Well, hey, I would want to know what was in my Kool-Aid before I drank it.
We were approached by an energetic individual named T.J. Lanier, who dared to figure out the how behind the secret, and brought with him investigative research tracing back to its original source.
We are sitting with the author, Mr. Dennis William Hawk. For us, we just kind of want to know what makes you an expert on this topic.
I have been studying the Emerald Tablet, researching it, translating it for the last 30 years.
Now, in The Secret, they show this symbol. It's in the backdrop. Did you catch it?
Yeah.
When you watched it? Explain this.
This is the Azoth of the philosophers. It actually has the stages of the Emerald Tablet embodied in these alchemical symbols. The idea was that man is able to be perfected into a god.
Right, simple answer. You want to know who is God? I am. The whole magical concept is that God is everywhere. This is not exclusively Wiccan concept.
You are God manifested in human form, made to perfection.
There is a divine nature in us that we can bring out by working with the Emerald Tablet.
But what is the Emerald Tablet?
The Emerald Tablet is, according to historical documents, is an actual tablet. And Thoth wrote the Emerald Tablet.
Thoth was a god in ancient Egypt with his own city, Hermopolis. All sacred writings of ancient Egypt were attributed to Thoth. Now, of course, the priests who wrote them know perfectly well that Thoth didn't write them, but they thought that faculty in themselves which inspired them to write such things was, in a way, participation in the mind or being of Thoth in some way. Thoth was associated with magic quite early on, but in the Ptolemaic period, when the Hermetica were being written, it becomes associated with other things that are now of interest. For example, astrology. Also, alchemy appears at this time. Alchemy very much associated with Thoth. Later, when the Persians conquered Egypt and were thrown out by Alexander the Great, Thoth becomes transformed a little bit. He becomes now Hermes Trismegistus.
When we talk about the Emerald Tablet, which is the wisdom behind the secret, this wisdom comes from this god called Hermes Trismegistus, which is actually the wisdom of Satan.
But as you start to learn about the Emerald Tablet and Thoth, there are some visual similarities that your mind starts to say, well, these sounds a lot like the concept of the serpent and the apple. Because the serpent was offering the wisdom of good and evil.
Yeah, exactly.
It was the knowledge. Let me just give you knowledge. He wasn't selling fruit. And so here we have this God who is telling humans how to become their own gods. He's giving them the knowledge of good and evil.
It's part of the teachings, and really it's the secret that maybe people don't want to know. But the basic idea is that it's not evil. It's been painted as evil.
So this is where the tie-in from Thoth to Hermes to Satan comes in.
Yeah,
it's because they're saying it's the same guy. He was the serpent in the garden, and the apple was the Emerald Tablet. It was the available knowledge that they had not had up to this point.
That's very true, and it's not something that people accept easily.
It's hard to swallow, but when we can begin to open ourselves up to that, the ramifications are awesome.
There is no wisdom coming from the devil that is going to be for free. There is no power coming from the devil that is going to be for free. He's going to offer you one solution, and it's going to be great, something that works. You're fascinated with the power, and then the tragedy comes. And then the former things that work for you in the beginning are not going to work anymore. You need to go deeper. When you meet witches or warlocks or people in the New Age or in the occult, they're always going to tell you how fantastic everything is, how great it is those ways, because that's what you are meant to teach to the people. That's what the devil expects you to proclaim, that his ways are fantastic.
The New Age movement has infiltrated our society, so much so that it's in the church. For example, when we're in the church and a pastor uses the word karma, and visualize yourself getting closer to the Lord. When it comes to even prosperity, see yourself with a bigger house, see yourself with a nicer car, see yourself with $1 million in the bank. All that comes out of pagan practice. All that comes out of the occult.
There are those who are into astrology, and yet they call themselves Christians.
Even exercise. Example, yoga. Yoga comes out of the Hindu religion, and a lot of the churches are holding yoga classes in the church.
So the church has many variations of paganism, and they don't even realize it's paganism, because sometimes the doctrines of men have intermingled with true biblical reality.
What happens is people are so ignorant of these things that they allow it in their churches. They allow it in their homes, in their kids' books. Example, Harry Potter. There are a tremendous amount of parents that are allowing, and the parents themselves that are reading this and saying, oh, it's just a fiction novel, oh, it's just fiction. It's okay, there's nothing bad with that. When really there is very much so just the darkness of witchcraft and the darkness of magic in that. And their kids are having it in their home at the same time going to Sunday school. Spirits cannot affect you unless you give them permission and authority. And the problem with the church now is that they've given the spirits and authority and the witches to come into their church.
Just about the end of my satanic career, I was being trained to counterfeit the gifts of the Spirit. I was enabled by my demonic spirits to have the power to read auras. They felt that I could manifest really good as a healer. I could turn to a person and say, you have a bad gallbladder, or your kidneys are wrong, and they would just go, praise God, this guy has spiritual discernment. And what they didn't know is that I was seeing that in their auras. I wasn't seeing it by the power of the Holy Spirit speaking to me. And they were going to send me into one of the most vital churches in our area to try and just totally tear down the church.
Since the beginning, the devil is a counterfeiter. He wants to produce something that is so similar to what God does in order to deceive people. The very root or the essence of counterfeit is not the opposite of truth. It's what it looks like the truth. If the devil comes or someone comes and offers you a $100 bill that is red, you're not going to take it. You know it's fake. But if you receive a $100 bill that is green, that it looks exactly like the real one, but the series are different, then you're going to be deceived. I know what it is, the power of the devil, and I know what it is, the power of God. And the power of God is so much greater. It's like comparing a bean with a football field. It's comparing the planet Earth with a cockroach. That's the level the devil can operate.
It's all through the Bible. We see Jesus being able to cast out the legion of demons that was in one man.
I mean, many times in the ministry, we are attacked or surrounded by people of the occult that want to harm us, and they get so scared. I have seen them just running away, scared, and they say they don't understand what's going on, but they can feel a presence that they cannot come against. They can feel a presence that will destroy them if they remain there. They just cannot resist the power of God.
They all know that they can only go up into a certain point before they are touched by the true fire. And it's only when you get the revelation of Jesus Christ, it's when you see that all that, as powerful as it seemed, it was not powerful at all when it came to the power of the Lord.
Now there's power in other demonic spirits, but please understand they're not gods, they're demons. So though they have a power, how could they ever compete with the God of the universe? It's impossible. He created everything. So when you call on the name of Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God, and you use that name to break the power of the enemy, it will be broken.
But as Christians, it's not just about what we say, it's about where we are. It's not what we talk, but from what place we're talking from. And if we talk from a heart that is totally bound with Jesus, the power is so extraordinary that no power of a cult can come against you. And there's a lot of people that just know Christ in their minds. And God is urging Christians to get their acts together, to stop playing church. I came to the occult by a former opera singer. And he said, you have to be given to the spirit of death. You have to die to everything that is mundane in this world so your soul can be lifted up to the higher dimensions of magic. And I fell in the trap.
My family and just the generations before me, our culture is brujeria. From the time I can remember, I was able to do things like move things without ever touching them, or just know things about people, see things. And in my family, that was normal.
The first sort of witchcraft I got involved with was, oddly enough, through the mail. I had gotten a book about Alex Sanders, the self-proclaimed king of the witches, and it resonated deeply within me, and so I wrote to the address in London and got some information. I got a series of courses. Then, by the time I was in college, I was deeply involved in it. I had begun experimenting with seances. I had an extensive amount of demon and influence in my life by the time I had started to make the transition from what was called white witchcraft to black witchcraft. Almost every move in my life that I made was governed by and controlled by demons, either through divination or else through direct communication with these beings. They would tell me what to do and I would do it. And they would very subtly, very gradually guide me into deeper and deeper patterns of evil.
And always being tormented by demons. I was always tormented. It wasn't something fun, even though I could do these things. It wasn't anything fun.
At that time, made it very clear that if I really wanted to progress much further, I would have to sell my soul to the devil. So that's what I did. After a little bit of soul searching, I decided if he was the true God, then why not give him my soul? You know, so I made a pact with the devil.
Little by little, I found out there were things the devil could not do. And I faced the devil, and I asked him, why do you say you are almighty and you cannot do these things? And he got so mad at me at that moment, and he says, I'm gonna kill you.
I was already okay with taking my life because I knew that the things around me were gonna take it, and I was determined to not let them take me before I could take myself.
And I actually lost my mind to the point that I cut my veins. I tried to commit suicide, and I end up into an insane asylum where I was locked for life. As I arrived to the hospital, I was bleeding. My sister took me to the hospital.
I had sent in a check to the Church of Satan at one point just to pay my yearly dues. And when it came back from the bank, some lady had written on it, I'll be praying for you in the name of Jesus. At that point, it was like someone just pulled the plug on my satanic power. And I just couldn't figure out what had happened because I'd sold my soul to the devil. I mean, I was supposed to have all these years of prosperity and wine, women, and song and everything I wanted, and here it was like Satan was being a welcher. What I didn't realize is that God had been invoked through intercessory prayer of believing Christians, and that it was totally crimping my style as a magician.
The devil doesn't love those who follow him. He hates them. Not because someone is in the lines of the devil, that means the devil is going to protect him, he's going to take care of him, he's going to give him everything he wants. That's the deception.
The next thing that happened is that Mormon missionaries showed up at our door, and because of the preconceptions we had been given by our witchcraft leaders, we welcomed them in. We figured this was the sign we needed, and so we were very quickly baptized into the Mormon Church.
2 days later, there was this man that came to the hospital, and he was a Christian pastor. Something entered that room, that it was like the truth entered that hospital room. And when I saw his eyes, something cleared in my mind, just by the presence that man was carrying. And he was preaching to me, and he said one thing. He said, Jesus is the truth. He's the way, and he's the life. And something hit me really deep.
After 4 years in the Mormon Church, I was given the job of teaching a institute class in the New Testament. And that forced me, for the first time in my life, to confront the biblical truth about salvation and about Jesus Christ. I read the book of Romans and was astounded to find what was in there. I think for the first time, probably because so many Christians were praying for me, my eyes were opened to the scriptural truth that indeed, you know, there is nothing that we can do to be saved. There is no way we can work our way to heaven.
I knew that this was the only thing I had left, was Jesus. And after that, the next morning, I just gave my heart to the Lord.
Finally, I decided that I had to do what the Bible said rather than what the Mormon leaders said. And I took off my temple garment and I asked Jesus Christ to come in and be my Savior and take over complete control and be Lord of my life. And at that moment, for the first time in 16 years of incredible spiritual searching, I knew peace. I knew what it was to have a friendship with God Almighty in the character of Jesus Christ.
The witches from Shakespeare's Macbeth, the Wicked Witch of the West, and Samantha from the TV series Bewitched are images of some witches that have persisted through the ages. But real witches dispel these myths and have historically shown us the religious truth behind their faith.
There's a lot of curiosity and just as much misinformation about the whole idea of witches and witchcraft. Well, to explain the myth and explore the mystery, we came here to where it all began in America in the 17th century, Salem, Massachusetts.
In the 17th century, the definition of witchcraft, or being a witch, meant that you had made a pact with the devil. They very much believed in the existence of the devil in the 17th century. The pact would have meant that you would give the devil your soul, and in exchange you would get magic, evil powers with which you could torment other people. That's the 17th century definition. Then, of course, there's the popular witch image, which we see a lot of at Halloween. That comes down through probably European culture. You think of Hansel and Gretel and the Wicked Witch out in the forest, the old woman who was going to bake them in her oven, the Wicked Witch in The Wizard of Oz, all that imagery. Then there's a third meaning, and this one is, of course, a very different kind of one. There are people who practice witchcraft today, and they date their religion back to ancient times. It is a very different kind of belief than the 17th century definition, and they want to make very sure that people understand that they do not have an entity of evil in their religion, but in fact worship nature and a goddess. They're very peaceful, very benign people.
Witchcraft is a religion that is earth-based, which means that it's a religion that works in harmony with the natural forces. It's an honoring of Mother Nature.
The fundamental belief is in the duality of the Godhead, that we believe in a God and Goddess. Within that form, it is the feminine and masculine principle within ourselves.
The church during the early years, 11th through 17th centuries especially, there was really a lot of propaganda confusing what is the god in nature and in witchcraft, the pagan god, who is another name for him is Pan, you know, the guy with playing the flute and dancing around, and they made him into the Christian idea of the devil so that God could have an adversary. There is no devil in witchcraft, and there never has been. That concept of evil is actually a Christian concept.
One of our creeds or credos is do what thou wilt, let it harm none, and also beware of the threefold law. It will come back in a return, as well as positive things. So that is a good check and balance, I believe.
The word Wicca or witchcraft comes from wicker. It means to bend or to shape, and it's about bending and shaping the realities that we can change. The negative propaganda against Wiccans has really translated into our fear of wearing our sacred symbols, especially the pentacle, the five-pointed star with the circle around it, which embodies earth, water, fire, air, and spirit, which is the microcosm of the universe. It is also a symbol of protection and reminds us of the web of life, the way everything is interconnected.
Witches will practice two ways, well, actually three ways. With robes, without robes, or in street clothes. To make the sanctity of the ritual that much more important, we reserve the robe for the magical rite.
We celebrate in circles as opposed to in rows of people sitting and watching someone perform a ceremony. It's very participatory, it's very personal, and everyone who is a part of ceremony contributes to ceremony. Well, we worship in small groups. As opposed to occasionally there's larger celebrations, but usually it's a smaller group. And you know, the traditional coven number is 13, and it's a small group, so you can really get to know people and really work together out of really getting to know each other over time. It's celebrations of the calendar of life, which is the agricultural calendar. The solstices, the equinoxes, the cross-quarter days.
You have several celebrations in a year, right? A lot of
Oh,
holidays.
yes, we have 8. We have 8 altogether. The one coming up is the fall equinox, and right after that will be Samhain, or Halloween is the more popular name for it. And these are agricultural holidays. These are the holidays of the farmer's year. And we also have lunar celebrations, full moon, dark moon, new moon celebrations, in addition to personal ceremony for rites of passage, for passages like birth and menopause and menstruation and death. I feel like I have special powers that I've nurtured. I think a general feeling with witches in general is that everyone has these so-called special powers, that they're natural to every person. It's a question of developing them and acknowledging them and learning how to use them for the benefit of yourself and others. Healing abilities, a lot of it is a development of empathy and compassion, which and intuition, which are certainly traits that everyone has available to them.
In many cultures, the evil eye is thought to bring misfortune and even death to those in its path. Evil sorcerers can cast the penetrating gaze, but others may have the inborn ability to use it and not even realize it. The evil eye strikes upon those who are at their peak of prosperity and happiness. If you fear the evil eye, you must immediately clench your hand with the thumb through the middle and fourth fingers. This is guaranteed to ward off the evil curse. Do you think that you could be a vampire? Here's a simple test. Do you sleep in a coffin? Do you like to drink human blood? Are you nocturnal? How do you feel about crucifixes, holy water, and garlic? According to an updated vampire census, there may be as many as 1,500 vampires worldwide. Meet Katrina Coffin, a real-life vampire.
I consider myself a vampire. My friends consider me to be a vampire. I'm nocturnal. I do have a casket that I sleep in. We're in my '68 Cadillac hearse at the moment. I also happen to be the president and founder of the Los Angeles Hearse Society. I have a European coffin in the back of my car that came from Italy, and I have a skeleton there. And people are fascinated with the hearses. You know, they think they're scary, but it's like a horror movie where you're scared, but you just can't look away. Yeah, I've been a vampire all my life. When I was a child and my friends would fall and cut themselves, I'd take blood from their wound, and it evolved into a thing where when I became a teenager, I'd have friends who would let me cut them with a razor blade or, you know, X-Acto knife or whatever and take their blood. And they became my donors. And no, I don't refer to them as victims. They're donors because they have to be consenting adults. I would never take blood from a child or an animal. When I was a child, that my parents would always find me in the closet or in a large box or something. I like little dark enclosed places. I always have, and I still do. And I find caskets very, very warm and comfortable.
I think some of the lore came from congenital syphilis, which the victims of congenital syphilis had pointed teeth. They were very, very light sensitive. Their eyes were very pale with dark, like, rims around them, and they were light blind. So that could have been part of the lore of the vampire. And a lot of the new legend that's coming through in vampire lore is coming from Anne Rice. The vampires that are very seductive, that are still pretty human, that are not these creeping, crawling, dead things. The love, the sex, the drama, that's all the Anne Rice stuff.
Oh, I love horror movies. I've been watching horror movies ever since I was a child. I grew up with all the old Bela Lugosi vampire movies and Christopher Lee and all the Dracula, Hammer films. I love horror movies. I've always been nocturnal, so when I was a kid, instead of being asleep when I was supposed to be, I was up all night watching the old black and white horror movies.
No, I never thought I would. Not even in my most wildest dreams did I ever think I would live next door to a vampire.
Yes, all my friends and neighbors know. It's nothing I hide. I don't feel I'm doing anything wrong.
Well, most neighbors would naturally ask another neighbor, may I borrow a couple of sugar or a cup of flour? And of course, in her case, I mean, she never bothers me or says, well, you might could I borrow a cup of blood, right? I mean.
And nowadays, I have donors, and I use a medical scalpel, and I take blood from them. And I take it directly from the wound because blood cools and coagulates very quickly. And once it's hit the air and cooled off, I don't enjoy it anymore. So it has to be fresh, warm, flowing, living blood.
I have told some of my friends. Well, they think it's weird. They think I should get out immediately. And they think that my life's in danger.
I was telling her a story about when I had someone with me that we had seen Interview with the Vampire. And I was trying to keep myself off of this person, so I got some raw liver, heated it up in the microwave to about room temperature, or body temperature, actually. And yeah, about body temperature, and ate it, so I didn't have the urge to cut into this person that I was sitting with.
Or you get some rare steak. That's always good, and it's still bleeding.
There's an intimacy to the way I take blood because it comes directly from the wound. And I have to be in physical contact with the person. And I have no sexual contact because sexually I'm celibate. So when I take blood, it's very intimate, and my donors also enjoy it. And I have no fear of death. And I like cemeteries. They're very peaceful and quiet and pretty. And I just enjoy, you know, hanging out at them.
He's been known as Beelzebub and Lucifer, that sly devil, the ruler of hell. We can't see him, but we know he's there. Is the Prince of Darkness alive and well and living in your neighborhood? Many believe he is.
Does the devil really exist here on earth? Is he just the representation of the evil side of man? Or is Satan among us? Father John Hamsch enlightened us on the forces of evil.
After years of experience, I have concluded that anyone who doesn't believe that the devil exists is simply exposing his ignorance or lack of experience. I'm convinced of that. The devil is an entity, an intelligent, super intelligent entity, has a personhood, is not a vague abstract force, and he is one who is at enmity with God and at enmity with all humans whom he wants to destroy.
The Bible talks about the enemy of man in Ephesians 6:12. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the principalities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms.
Yes, I think everyone has seen the work of the devil, although many have not recognized it, but it's very obvious everywhere. More dramatic presences of the devil are manifested through things like Satanism or lesser forms of demonic intervention, such as poltergeist activities and things of that sort.
Possession is the most extreme form of demonic involvement, and for a priest, an exorcism is the most dangerous act to perform.
In the Catholic Church, it's very conservatively approached, because only bishops or priests assigned by a bishop in any given diocese can perform a formal exorcism. Anyone can perform a deliverance, a mild deliverance, by simply prayer for the healing from the contamination. As Jesus said in Mark 16:17, those who believe in me can cast out demons in my name by my power. So those who believe in the Lord have access to that. But real possession is extremely dangerous. For instance, I was sort of accidentally involved in an exorcism in praying over a lady one time who was sitting on a couch, and she just had some relatively minor complaints that I kind of suspected might be a spirit of infirmity, so I prayed generally a very superficial type of prayer. And when I invoked the name of Jesus against the forces of evil that might be there, when I invoked the name of Jesus against that, the person was thrown, I mean literally thrown from the couch all the way across the room and curled up in a fetal position behind a lamp in the corner. And it was a violent reaction to the invocation of Jesus to attack the forces of evil that were there. They responded with extreme fear.
The Catholic Church believes the devil exists and wants to take possession of your soul.
Depending upon the proclivity of the individual, how much they're amenable to this type of invasion, they will have this or that level of demonic intervention. A person who commits himself to the devil is submitting to the enemy of God. And it's one of the worst things he could possibly ever do, because he will pay what we call in demonology the devil's compensation. He may, by committing himself to the devil, selling his soul, as it were, they may attain some very powerful things, but eventually they will pay for it, and pay for it 100-fold. You pay the devil ultimately for any kind of covenant or contract you make with the devil. In a sense, we're the battlefield of the spiritual warfare between God and the devil, trying to win our souls. We have a free will by which we can go to either side of the fence we want. We can cooperate with God and follow his revelation that tells us what to do, or we can follow the devil and succumb to our natural proclivities as a result of original sin.
Father Hampsch will continue to fight this battle against demonic forces because he truly believes that the power of God's love is greater than any devil.
Whether we believe in the devil or not, we throw his name around almost daily in the English language. We say expressions like between the devil and the deep blue sea when faced with a tough decision, or people complain there'll be the devil to pay when worried about a problem. We can answer by telling them the devil may care, or for the sake of argument, we can play the devil's advocate. Like it or not, the devil is very much a part of our lives. Howling at a full moon, a fanged creature, part human, part animal. Folklore says I have just described a werewolf. But how did this legend begin? And is there any validity to it?
Even a man who is pure at heart and says his prayers by night will turn into a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is full and bright. Those words were spoken by the gypsy woman Mileva, played by legendary Russian actress Maria Uspenskaya in the 1941 Universal release of The Wolfman. It's filmed right here, as a matter of fact. It also featured another young star by the name of Lon Chaney Jr., who played a part of the Wolfman. But that's the movies, right? I mean, werewolves don't exist in real life. Not in present day. Do they? We know werewolves in mythology and modern horror stories. This is where we expect them to stay, in our fantasies. But through centuries, mutilated bodies of innocent victims have created legends of werewolf attacks. There has even been reports of sightings of these beasts. Dating back centuries, the most common belief was that werewolves were a creation of the devil, or may even be a witch's revenge. All the legends had one thing in common. Werewolves were never detected during the day. It was at night when these creatures lurked from the shadows. Stimulated by the full moon and forced by an inexplicable desire, the man-wolf set out to get his victim for no other reason but for the urge to kill. Could some men somehow transform themselves into demonic, hairy monsters which prowl when the moon is full? Even if there were a remote chance of that happening, it would be too bizarre to be believable. Or would it? In fact, doctors have a medical term for this werewolf-type syndrome: lycanthropy. They say that in every one of us lies secret, savage desires, safely stored away. Most of us keep those desires under tap, but then there are those who are overwhelmed by ancient memories of when humans were hunters and killers. Thus is born the man-wolf. Although lycanthropy can be triggered by several mental conditions, the fact remains that it exists. Dr. Gerard Fieldman, a psychiatrist, treats people who suffer from lycanthropy. He told us the reason why it is not a widely publicized issue is fear of prosecution, because his patients have killed.
Lycanthropy has never been used in court as the grounds for committing murder. With all the skeptics out there, it would be impossible to prove.
Dr. Fieldman told us the killings were almost never traced back to his patients because the victims are total strangers. People with lycanthropy suffer from a physical and hormonal imbalance which affects both brain and body. Dr. Fieldman says his patients are normal people in everyday life. We met one of his patients. If we expected someone with fangs and yellow eyes, well, we were disappointed.
When I look at other people, they look normal, I guess, like I do, and sometimes I just wonder, do they feel the same way I do? Do they have the same kind of urges I do?
When excessive amounts of hormones are discharged in the body, it could have a major effect on someone, mentally and physically.
With some patients, there's an incredible transformation. Facial hair develops, there's an increase in physical strength, there's a craving for human blood, and then they develop a delusion of being a wolf.
Certain times of the month, these symptoms reach full-blown status.
There's no question about it. The full moon is my worst enemy.
The dangerous part is that lycanthropy causes an irresistible impulse to hunt and destroy.
If I kill people? Can you ask me something else?
Believe me, these people kill. It's out of their control. It's not someone just having a bad day.
It's horrible. I mean, people just don't understand, the living hell that it is. I mean, this isn't Hollywood. It's not like in the movie Wolf, where Jack Nicholson gets the girl and everything works out. I mean, it's a living hell. It's lonely and it's horrible.
Although our interviews merely show the possibility of so-called werewolves in modern society, no proof exists of killings in the last century by these people. But as they say, no one is prepared to rush forward and admit to senseless bloodshed. So next time when the moon is full and you feel a twinge in your stomach and your hands begin to shake, you may become a werewolf. Or you may have indigestion. In either case, You'll feel better in the morning.
The name Ramu was given to the 10-year-old boy who was captured in a forest living among the wolves. The wolf boy was on all fours, his hair matted, his nails like claws, and his palms, elbows, and knees were calloused like the pads of a wolf's paw. He ate raw meat, and even after his capture would still sneak out and attack chickens, disembowel them with his teeth, and eat them, entrails and all. He died in 1985. During his short span in civilization, he learned to wash and wear clothes, but never to speak. When you see a snake, what do you feel? Fear? In America, maybe, but throughout the world, snakes have played a powerful and revered role in many rituals and ancient traditions.
Many of us can relate to Indiana Jones's phobia of snakes. For a long time, controversy has surrounded the snake. Religious authorities have debated whether the snake symbolizes the higher or lower kingdoms.
Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of goddess-centered civilizations in many areas, dating from 5,000 to 30,000 years ago. The artifacts are goddesses and high priestesses that were part of a peaceful world. In countries such as India and Mexico, goddess worship was destroyed by domineering male gods who killed the goddess and scattered her fragments all over the world. Now, groups like Echoes of the Goddess are putting the pieces of the goddess religion back together. As a gypsy dancer, Regina has breathed life into a tradition long forgotten.
It represents the rising of the consciousness, like the Kundalini power, that is coiled on the bottom of your spine, and then your consciousness rises, and that's what I like to represent with the snake dance.
In her dance, the wise woman brings the snake, the symbol of knowledge, to be shared by all. Her learning from the snake progresses as the rising of the Kundalini power through the chakras, igniting creativity and awareness along the way. Once she has learned all there is to know and is ready to share her knowledge with the world, the wise woman comes and retrieves the snake. The snake dance has held particular importance in more than one culture. The Hopi Indians treat the snake dance as a religious ceremony for transformation and healing. With poisonous rattlers in their mouths, they dance and pray for rain to quench their parched crops. Then before the sun sets, they release the snakes into the desert to take their prayers to the gods of the underworld. The Hopis believe they emerged from Mother Earth, so these gods are in heaven. In voodoo, a combination of the African Udon religion and Catholicism, the snake dance is done after rituals to balance the energies. The snake represents their god, Damballa, and is the most powerful and sacred symbol of worship.
While the snake is represented in just about every culture, its meaning is different in nearly every one.
For Christian religions, the serpent is an evil creature, one which tempted Eve with the fruit of the tree of knowledge and caused the original sin. But the snake has long represented death and rebirth, like the shedding of the snake's skin, a cycle through which the soul is transformed. For the Aztecs, the snake embodied the earthbound nature of man and stood for their highest god, Quetzalcoatl. He was a dying hero, pictured as a feathered flying serpent, who they believed would someday return. In Hinduism, gods are represented with serpents, one with snakes coiled around his wrist and neck, and another who sleeps on a serpent bed. The snake has a powerful energy people respect. In fact, to this day, the Cobra Festival is practiced without a single person bitten. In Burma, the cobra is so revered, this priestess drew a king cobra from underneath a rock. She kissed it 3 times on the head so it would bring rain for the next harvest. Ancient Egyptian imagery shows the snake as the highest godlike force. Egyptian pharaohs always wore a headband with a snake that stood for both inner vision and control of the universe. While some saw it as kind of an eye of Horus, others believed it to be the sacred eye of Ra. The symbol of the American Medical Association, a staff with an intertwined snake, can be traced to ancient times, to the Greek god Asclepios. Similar to today, it means wisdom through healing. But it should not be confused with the caduceus, two intertwined snakes on a staff, held by the Greek god Hermes. Whatever tradition you follow, the symbol of the snake has an important significance. The snake's shedding of the skin is like death and rebirth, discarding the past in order to continue to live, something we should all strive for.
It may take a while to get completely comfortable with the snake, but the more we learn about it, the more we take the mystery out of the myth.
From the Salem witch trials to the eve of Halloween, witches and witchcraft have been branded by misconception and myth. Ironically, the true practice of witchcraft has existed for centuries and is an honored religion in many cultures of the world.
In a small African village, a feud was brewing. Torn between two lovers, Tepi, a young Zulu woman, knew the time would come when she had to make a choice before disaster set in. Instinctively, Tepi went to the one person who could help her in choosing the right husband. That one person who could see the future and change fate. In Africa, the witch doctor rules his people with an iron fist. And in the stir of a potion, anything can happen. The witch doctor is healer, psychiatrist, and wizard. Ceremoniously, the inhale of burning wild heather brings on the spirits. Lizard's tail and a drop of chicken blood will cure warts. But add rainwater and willow root, and a love problem could be solved. In the flick of a wrist, Tepi's future is laid out clearly. Her husband is to be the young man from the local village. Many children are predicted for Tepi. She makes peace with the witch doctor's verdict because in the world where she lives, the witch doctor's word is law. Today, Africa is still referred to as the Dark Continent. Torn between westernized society and primal instinct, the modern African still clutches to the ancient beliefs and rituals of witchcraft. Witchcraft is a faith regarded with fear and treated with care. But there is good witchcraft, and then there is bad witchcraft. Anger, hate, lust, and greed are all human weaknesses which the tribal African considers as tools bad witches use to cast evil spells over people. That is where the witch doctor steps in, to counteract harmful magic and to help ward off evil. In a city as modern as any other in the world, where the stock exchange rules the economy, small shops filled with roots, powders, and animal cadavers rule the people. They say it's the baboon's teeth that protect one from ill fortune, and the baboon's hand you sleep with to chase the evil spirits away. Some say witchcraft is a dying religion. Others say the practice has just become more secretive. Witchcraft as a religion has been part of Africa for thousands of years, and over the centuries it has spilled over to other continents in all shapes and forms. Long ago, when Africans were captured as slaves, they were forced to adopt the religion of their masters. In daytime, the slaves prayed to the Catholic saints, but as soon as the sun set, primal instinct took over. Behind closed doors, they returned to the ancient rituals of witchcraft. Over the years, Catholicism and witchcraft merged. The result was voodoo, a faith which is very much a part of Haiti, Brazil, and parts of America. Worshippers of voodoo claim that it is a very misunderstood religion.
A lot of things in this religion might look spooky or strange to someone that didn't understand them, but they are here for more than spooky effect. They symbolize things. It's not an evil religion. There's no Satan in voodoo.
With the saints to pray to, the gods to keep them on the right track, and the colorful rituals, voodooists claim that their religion is just another path leading to God.
But voodoo does have a darker side, a side that Hollywood loves to exploit in the movies.
Pins and dolls, hexes and black magic, and then a curse, worse than the most violent death. Zombification.
Zombification has gone on and probably does still go on over in Haiti. The powder does exist. I'm sure there can be very good uses for it. The problem is it's not used for good. It's used to get control over another person and create a zombie. I mean, exactly what you'd picture.
A potion from the blowfish is used to create a zombie.
Once a person is taken this in, the effects are to render them seemingly lifeless. At that time, they're buried, put actually into the ground. They're still conscious, but they don't give any signs of being alive.
Once the zombie is unburied, it becomes a puppet controlled by a master with evil intentions. The zombie will do anything it is told, even kill.
True voodoo practitioners do not agree with controlling the will of another, which is all zombification is about. It's really not voodoo, it's black magic.
There's good and bad in all religions, black magic and white magic. But where does white magic end and black magic begin?
If you're following a religion such as witchcraft or voodoo or Catholicism, any religion, you have rules to live by. And most of the time, those rules say, harm no one and do what thou will.
And if you can't live by the rules, the force of the metaphysical takes over.
Because there's the belief in karma that the voodooist adheres to. And if they inflict harm on someone else, it will come back on them.
A theory not lost in Christianity, also known as the Golden Rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Toads, snakes, wings of bats, ingredients of a witch's brew, at least as depicted in folklore. Is it fact or fiction? In contrast to the lighter side, there was a darkness that prevailed during the witch hunts of the Middle Ages. Once you were accused of being a witch, you had no recourse. Your fate was sealed for death.
Black magic and witchcraft. Ominous words that play havoc with the imagination, creating visions of their own. In the Middle Ages, superstition ruled. Fantasy and ignorance laid the bed for the most popular belief about witches. In a time when the church controlled the people, one man's religion was another man's witchcraft. Witches supposedly worshipped the devil, raised storms, concocted potions, and frolicked with evil spirits. Graveyards were their playgrounds, and they even offered babies to the son of Satan. Unexplainable events were blamed on witches. These so-called witches were more often than not old, ugly women who had to beg for food. Church leaders whipped up fear and fanatic myths, sending an uneducated populace into a frenzy of panic. The church declared all women weak and evil and subject to the devil's influence. Women became almost the sole suspects of witchcraft. Witch hunts were a tangled web of dread, suspicion, and sadistic ventures. The Inquisition was relentless. The accused would be tortured until they confessed. Justice was a mockery. Facts and evidence were of little importance. Armed with their obscure confessions, authorities would sentence these powerless victims to their death.
In Europe, an estimated 200,000 people were executed at burning stakes. Today, witchcraft is often regarded with, if nothing else, a little uneasiness. Yet there are people all over the world who still claim to be witches. White witches who use their power for good, such as healing. But on the darker side, black witches use their power in the name of Satan. One of the most famous places for witchcraft in England is Pendle Forest. The beautiful surroundings set an unlikely background for dark tales of witchcraft through the centuries. Pendle's first brush with witchcraft came about in the 15th century when a few mysterious incidents took place in the area. An old local woman was accused of using supernatural powers. A major witch hunt began. In the late 1980s, a new witch hunt swept through England. Pendle Forest was the focal point. Rumors of children being sacrificed in satanic rituals ran rapid. By 1993, the whole thing had fizzled out due to lack of evidence. There are claims that witchcraft, in its Earth Mother guise, is alive and well and thriving in Pendle. Even a grave of a famous witch dating back to 1651 is still intact in the witch's graveyard. There is an air of magic that lingers in the hills of Pendle Forest, drawing those who would use its incredible power. A power that should be treated with caution. Edward Stopforth is the owner of Witches Galore, a shop which caters to the local witches.
There were good witches in the area. There are still good witches in the area. I married one of them. There's also bad witches. I suppose in most people's minds it's good and evil, opposing forces, light and dark. Most people are made up of both components, aren't they? There's good and there's evil, and good and bad in all of us.
25 miles away from Pendle Forest, we discovered a place with dark secrets. Walls grooved with history, from marching feet of Roman soldiers to the cries of tortured witches in medieval times. Lancaster Castle still stands. Today, it's a working prison. I re-walked the eerie trail through history.
The further you're going down, the older it's becoming. And the dungeon to the other side of this has had a carbon date on a piece of willow fibre that puts it around about 200 AD.
A dark, narrow stairway leads 15 feet below to the cell where witches in the Middle Ages awaited trial. A very damp, cold hole greeted us.
Part of the treatment in the Middle Ages was to lock men and women up in the dark. That way you had no discipline problems, because anybody being locked in the dark gets isolated, lonely, and afraid after a bit. It's very small for to think that in actual fact at one time they had almost 19 people in here. You can see on the floor here the rings, and that's one of two. The other one's down there. And well rusted, because it's been there almost the best part of 3.5 centuries.
This is where they were chained?
They were chained to if they wanted to chain them.
It is here in these appalling conditions that the witches awaited their trials, tortured beyond human comprehension.
Cold cell was a form of punishment, if you like. They would put a man in there for 3 days, and they'd put him in naked, and he wouldn't have any heating, and there could be snow outside.
Oh my.
If he survived the 3 days, well and good. If he didn't, then it was no problem.
Looking at Lancaster Castle today, you can hardly believe the grim history that lies behind the walls. A history that still haunts. There have been prisoners at the castle who actually claim to have seen the ghosts of old, hideous creatures roaming the halls. A few even say that on certain nights, these stone walls echo with cries of terror.